The rain came down all at once, without warning. It wasn't that fine late afternoon drizzle Dorinha knew well. It was a collapse, as if the sky had been holding on to anger for weeks and decided to release everything that night. She was on the porch, wrapped in a wool shawl that had belonged to her husband, when she saw the two of them appear the bend in the dirt road. A tall man, shoulders hunched forward as if carrying something invisible, and a small girl hanging at his side, both soaked, walking too slowly for people caught in the middle of a storm. Dorinha stood still. Her heart beat differently. In the last 18 months, since Elio died, she hadn't opened her door to anyone who wasn't family or a known neighbor. The farm was nearly 6 kilometers from the nearest town, on a road the mill truck passed on Tuesdays and Thursdays. There were days when she didn't hear a human voice for 48 hours straight. She learned to like the silence, because it was the only alternative left. But that girl, even from a distance, even soaked, was holding something against her chest with both arms. An animal. A cat, maybe. Or a toy. Dorinha couldn't see clearly with the heavy rain falling between them. The man stopped by the fence. He didn't call out, didn't shout. He just stood there, looking at her with an expression that would take Dorinha weeks to describe precisely. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't a threat. It was exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from a bad night's sleep, but from months carrying a weight that has no name. "Do you have a place where the girl can stay dry?" he asked. His voice came out low, almost swallowed by the rain. Dorinha looked at the girl. The child was about 7, 8 years old. Dark hair stuck to her face, and she was indeed holding an orange cat wrapped in a wet shirt, protecting the animal with her own body as if it were the most important thing in the world. She opened the gate, not because she wasn't afraid. She was, but because the girl was trembling, and there was a limit to how much cold Dorinha could ignore without feeling less human than she was. Inside the house, in the yellowish light of the living room, she got a better look at them. The man's name was Renato. He said it without her asking, as if he knew the information would help. He was about 35, maybe 40. A thin scar on his right eyebrow. Calloused hands, of someone who works with land or heavy labor. The girl was Bia. She didn't say anything. She stayed by her father's side with the cat in her lap, her big dark eyes slowly scanning the house, as if memorizing every detail. Dorinha made tea, heated up some soup left over from lunch, grabbed dry clothes, one of Elio's shirts for Renato, one of her blouses that fit Bia like a dress. While they changed in the bathroom, she stood in the kitchen with her hand resting on the unlit stove, trying to understand what she had done. That night, Renato explained that the car had gotten stuck 3 kilometers ahead, that they had tried to reach the town before the rain closed in. He said they could sleep on the porch if she preferred, that they didn't want to bother her. Dorinha pointed to the guest room without saying a word. What she didn't say, and what stayed in her mind for days, was the bag Renato carried. A simple, worn backpack, strapped to his back as if it were part of his body. At no moment did he set on the ground. Not when he ate, not when he took off his wet coat. Only when he went to sleep, and even then Dorinha saw, through the crack of the door, that he placed it under the bed before lying down. That early morning, while the rain kept beating against the tin roof, Dorinha found herself awake in the couple's bed that was now only hers, listening to the house breathe. There was a different sound, the breathing of other people. Small, almost imperceptible, but different. For the first time in 18 months, the silence did not hurt. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell in the comments what you thought, and from which city or country you are watching. In the morning, Dorinha woke up expecting to find the house empty. It wasn't pessimism. It was experience. She knew how certain people worked. They take what they need and disappear before breakfast. Not out of malice, but because gratitude is heavy, and some people don't know how to carry it. But Renato was in the yard, his back turned to her, fixing the chicken coop fence that had fallen during the storm the night before. Without asking permission, without checking if he could, as if he knew that some things just need to be done, period. Bia was sitting on the porch step with the orange cat in her lap, watching her father work. When she saw Dorinha at the door, she didn't look away. She just said, in the serious voice of someone certain of what they're saying, "His name is Farofa." Dorinha looked at the cat. The animal had one eye half closed and one ear bent forward, as if it always looked sleepy. "Good name," she replied. It was the first time Bia smiled. Renato stayed until noon fixing what the rain had damaged. He replaced 2 loose roof tiles, unclogged the gutter, reset a fence post that had been giving way for a while. Elio had never been good with that kind of thing. Dorinha always called a neighbor Tobias when she needed it, but Tobias charged a lot and took 3 weeks to show up. At lunchtime, Renato said the tow truck would arrive in the afternoon to pull the car out of the mud. After that, "We'll be gone," he said, without looking at her. "I don't want to be a burden." Dorinha didn't answer. She kept looking at Bia, who was breaking bread with both thumbs with a concentration far too serious for an 8-year-old child. The tow truck didn't arrive that afternoon. It came the next day, but the car, besides being stuck, had an axle problem that the tow truck driver himself diagnosed for free and said would cost more than the car was worth. Renato stood on the road, looking at the vehicle for a long time. Then he walked back to the farm, without saying anything. Dorinha didn't ask. She just left the room ready for another night. It was on Wednesday, 3 days after the rain, that she began to realize something was wrong in a different way. Renato worked well, spoke little, ate without complaint, and treated Bia with a quiet tenderness that Dorinha recognized. It was the kind of care that comes from a father who has already been afraid of losing his child and swore he wouldn't let anything be missing again. But he slept badly. Dorinha heard his footsteps during the night. The hallway would creaking slowly, like someone trying not to wake anyone, while checking if the windows were closed. Once, at 3 in the morning, she saw him standing on the porch looking at the entrance gate. Standing, motionless, for almost 20 minutes. On Friday afternoon, a white pickup truck arrived on the dirt road. It slowed near the gate, stayed there for about 2 minutes without anyone getting out, then drove away slowly. Dorinha was in the garden and wouldn't have paid attention, but she saw Renato, who was carrying firewood beside the house, stop completely, his hands holding the wood, his eyes fixed on the truck until it disappeared around the bend. That night, after Bia fell asleep, Dorinha placed 2 cups of coffee on the table. Renato looked at her. "You can ask," he said. "You don't have to tell anything you don't want to," she replied. He stayed silent for a while. Then he spoke, slowly, like someone choosing each word before letting it go. "I worked 3 years on a farm in the countryside. The owner has a big name in the region. Politics, land, money. Pause. I saw things I shouldn't have seen. I signed papers I shouldn't have signed without reading. When I understood the size of what I was in the middle of, I tried to leave quietly. But quietly wasn't an option he offered." Dorinha held the cup with both hands. "The girl," she said softly. "Her mother died 2 years ago." Renato's voice didn't shake, but something in his eyes shifted. "I have nowhere to go with Bia where he won't arrive first." Dorinha stared at the dark coffee in the cup. She thought about Elio. She thought about the silence of the last 18 months. She thought about the white pickup truck stopped at the gate without anyone getting out. Then she stood up, went to the window, and checked if the latch was properly closed. Then she returned to the table, sat down, and this time, it was her who stayed silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice came out firmer than she expected from herself. "Tomorrow you tell me the rest. Not because I need to know everything, but because this kind of weight becomes lighter when you share it with someone who has already decided not to send you away." The next morning, Renato told everything. Not all at once. It came out in pieces, between one sip of coffee and another, while Bia slept and the sun still hadn't warmed enough to drive away the chill of dawn. He spoke looking at the table. Dorinha listened looking at him. The farmer's name was Valdo Serrano. He had land in 4 municipalities, 2 councilmen in his pocket, and a name that people in the region pronounced more quietly than usual, as if the volume of their voice could travel distances. Renato had worked on the main farm as a logistics foreman. He controlled the entry and exit of trucks, signed invoices, organized transport documentation. For almost a year, he thought he was just doing his job. Then he began to notice that certain invoices didn't match what the trucks were carrying, that certain areas of the farm didn't appear on any map he had access to, that workers arrived one way and left another, quieter, more hunched, avoiding eye contact. There was a folder. Renato described it without going into detail, but Dorinha understood enough. Documents, copies of falsified invoices, records of land transfers that, in theory, belonged to small farmers, but in practice had already had a new owner for years. He had kept everything without knowing exactly why. Instinct, maybe, or fear of one day needing to prove that he knew things without having done anything on purpose. When Valdo realized that Renato was paying too much attention, things changed quickly. First came the messages through third parties. Then, one night, someone broke into the house where he and Bia lived at the edge of the farm. They didn't take anything. They just left the door open so he would understand the message. Renato took Bia, took the backpack with the folder, and left before dawn. Dorinha stayed silent for a moment. Then she asked, "That folder is here?" He nodded. "Under the bed," he said, "the same way it's been since the first night." She didn't ask why he had trusted that to her, without even asking if he could. Some things happen before logic. That same day, Dorinha made 3 decisions that she didn't immediately share with anyone. The first was to call her sister-in-law Marcia, who worked at a registry office in town and knew almost every lawyer in the region. She didn't tell the details, only said she needed the name of someone trustworthy, preferably someone who didn't owe favors to any farmer. Marcia stayed silent for about 3 seconds, the kind of silence of someone who understood more than was said, and promised to call back by the end of the day. The second decision was to ask Renato not to leave the farm for now, not in an authoritarian way, but directly. He agreed without arguing, like someone who had learned that resisting all help is not strength, it's costly stubbornness. The third was to take from the back of the closet a cardboard box she hadn't opened since Elio's funeral. Inside it was the contact of a man named Dersu, a distant cousin of her husband, who had worked for years in the public prosecutor's office before retiring. Elio always said Dersu was the kind of person who slept well at night because he never did anything he needed to hide. She didn't call Dersu that day. She held the paper in her hand for a while, looking at the number written by hand in Elio's handwriting. She folded it slowly and put it in the pocket of her apron. In the afternoon, Bia appeared in the kitchen with farofa in her arms and asked if she could help with dinner. Dorinha said yes and taught the girl how to peel cassava without cutting her finger, holding the knife with her thumbs touching the blade on the dull side. Bia paid attention with the seriousness of someone truly learning something important. At some point, without either of them noticing exactly when, the kitchen became noisier. There was conversation, the sound of the knife on the cutting board, farofa meowing near the stove. There was the smell of hot food. Renato appeared at the kitchen door and stood there watching the scene for a few seconds with an expression that Dorinha only identified later when she was trying to sleep. It was relief, the kind that hurts a little because the person didn't know how much they needed it. Dorinha didn't say anything. She just pointed to the empty chair near the window. He sat down. Bia began telling a story about farofa and a lizard that had appeared behind the cabinet that morning, the narrative growing with each sentence the way children do when they feel they have a real audience. Renato listened to his daughter attentively. He smiled at one specific moment, quickly, almost imperceptibly, but Dorinha saw it. That night, she took the paper out of her pocket and looked at Dersu's number for a while. It wasn't time yet, but it would be. The white pickup truck returned on Thursday. This time it didn't stay parked on the road. It slowly drove through the gate that Dorinha had left open for the feed truck to pass. 2 men got out. One of them Dorinha had never seen. The other was Tobias, the neighbor who fixed fences and charged a lot. She felt her stomach turn. Tobias said the men were from the Serrano farm and that they had a message to deliver. He spoke with his head down, without looking at her, the way someone does when they know they're doing something wrong and decide to do it anyway. The man beside him was younger, thin, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said the boss knew she was sheltering Renato and the girl. He said that could create problems for everyone. He said the word problem carefully, like someone placing a full glass on the table without wanting to spill it. Dorinha stood still in the middle of the yard. Inside, something was rearranging itself in silence. "You can tell your boss this is private property," she replied, "and that you need to leave now." The man smiled again, said he hoped she would think it over. Then the two got into the pickup and left without hurry, which was a kind of threat too. Tobias stayed standing there. Tried to say something. Dorinha didn't let him. "Close the gate when you leave," she said, and went inside. Renato was at the kitchen window. He had heard everything. His face was tense, but his eyes had that look of someone who already knows this kind of visit and what usually comes after. "I'm leaving today," he said. "I can't let." "You're not going anywhere," Dorinha interrupted. She went to the drawer of the hallway dresser, took the phone, and dialed the number that had been on the paper for days. Dersu answered on the second ring, as if he had been waiting. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Dorinha told everything from the beginning. The backpack, the folder, the documents, the workers, the name Valdo Serrano. Dersu stayed silent most of the time, only asking short, precise questions, the kind that shows the person on the other side understands exactly what they are hearing. At the end, he said he knew a prosecutor in the capital who took this kind of case seriously. He said he needed 2 days. They were the longest 2 days Dorinha could remember since Elio's funeral. On the morning of the second day, Bia woke up with a fever. It wasn't serious, but the girl stayed quiet on the couch with Farofa in her lap, the cat's half-closed eye matching the rhythm of her breathing. Dorinha made lemon balm tea, soaked a cloth in cold water, and sat on the edge of the couch until the fever went down. Renato stayed on the other side of the room looking at his daughter with that expression of a father who wants to take the illness onto himself and can't. At some point in the afternoon, Bia took Dorinha's hand and fell asleep like that. Renato saw it. He didn't say anything, but when Dorinha lifted her eyes to him, there was something different on his face. It was no longer just relief. It was something else, deeper, that both people in that house knew the name of, but neither would say out loud yet. The prosecutor called at the end of the day. He wanted the original documents and a formal statement from Renato. He said the irregularities of the Serrano farm had already been on the public prosecutor's radar for months, but what was missing was exactly what Renato had kept in the backpack under the bed. What was missing was a witness willing to speak. Renato stayed silent after Dorinha hung up. She placed the phone on the table and waited. "If I give this statement," he said slowly, "there's no turning back." "I know," she replied. "They'll come with more than 2 men." "I know." He looked at her for a while. "Why are you doing this?" Dorinha thought before answering. She thought about Elio, who died without having any enemies and without having done anything extraordinary, and who still left a hole the size of an entire life. She thought about the 18 months of silence. She thought about Bia's small hand holding hers while she slept with a fever. "Because I've stayed still for too long," she said, "and staying still didn't save me from anything." The next morning, Renato signed the statement. The folder was delivered to the prosecutor by an officer who came personally to the farm. 2 days later, Valdo Serrano was taken in for questioning. No smile, no pickup truck, no message. Tobias showed up at the gate that afternoon, on foot, hat in hand. Dorinha stood on the porch long enough for it to be uncomfortable. Then she made a small gesture with her head. Some things time resolves better than any conversation. 2 years passed, not in a gentle way, as if time had solved everything on its own. It was 2 years of legal proceedings, of court dates, of phone calls with the prosecutor, of nights when Renato woke in the middle of the madrugada and stood on the porch staring into the dark until the sky began to lighten. But it was also 2 years of cassava being peeled, of Farofa sleeping on top of the cold stove, of Bia learning to read the weather by the color of the clouds, just like Dorinha had learned from Elio when she was young. Valdo Serrano was charged with land grabbing, document fraud, and the use of labor under irregular conditions. The trial was long. His name appeared in the regional newspaper 3 times. By the 3rd time, no one was afraid to say it out loud anymore. Renato stayed at the farm throughout the entire process on the prosecutor's recommendation, who wanted the witness nearby. He stayed taking care of the garden, the chicken coop, the fence that always needed some repair. He stayed because it was the right place to be, and the two of them knew it without needing to negotiate. Bia started school in town at the beginning of the following year. The first week was hard. She came home quieter than she left, her eyes wide in the way of someone who had absorbed too much new information and hadn't processed it yet. But in the third week, she showed up in the kitchen with a folded note that the teacher had sent. Bia had read out loud to the entire class without stuttering, and the class had applauded. Dorinha folded the note and kept it in the same cardboard box where Dersu's number was. On a Saturday in May, while Renato fixed the water pump motor and Bia drew on the porch with Farofa by her side, Dorinha went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and took out Elio's favorite shirt. She held it for a while. She smelled the fabric, which no longer carried a person's scent, only that of a wardrobe in time. She folded it carefully and placed it in a separate box, along with their wedding photo and the watch he used on special days. It wasn't a goodbye. It was an arrangement, the kind that says, "You will always be here, but I need space for other things too." She closed the closet and went to make lunch. That afternoon, the four of them had lunch together: Dorinha, Renato, Bia, and Dersu, who had become a frequent visitor after everything, showing up once a month with cheese bread and stories from the time he worked in the public prosecutor's office, stories that lasted longer than the coffee. Bia loved Dersu. She stayed by his side asking for one more, the same seriousness on her face, but her eyes shining in a way Dorinha recognized as happiness not yet named. After lunch, while Dersu and Renato talked on the porch and Bia had gone to feed the cat, Dorinha stayed alone in the kitchen washing the dishes. The sink window faced the yard, and she could see Bia crouched near the fence calling Farofa with her palm open, patiently, the way children call animals when they still believe the world responds if you ask properly. The yard was full of sunlight. Dorinha stood still with her hand in the water for a moment, looking at the scene outside without any hurry at all. That night, before going to sleep, she let her thoughts pass as they come, without trying to hold on to any of them. She thought about Elio, like every day, but this time without that pain that tightens the middle of the chest before the thought even finishes. It was a different kind of longing, more open, the kind that fits alongside other things. She thought about Renato in the room that had been the guest room, and that had not been a guest room for a long time. She thought about Bia sleeping with Farofa curled at her feet. She thought that the house was noisy in a way she never expected she would miss one day, and that she did. Then she turned off the light and closed her eyes. There is no formula for starting over. There is no right day, the right time, the moment when the pain fades enough for life to fit back in. What exists is a rainy night, two strangers on the road, and the decision to open the gate, even while afraid. The rest is built slowly, meal by meal, folded notes kept in cardboard boxes. Sometimes saving someone is the only way to save yourself. And sometimes it's not even about saving. It's about simply not closing the door when life knocks on it. If this story touched you in any way, leave in the comments what you felt, and tell from which city or country you are watching. Subscribe to the channel and like the video so this story can reach more people who need to hear it today.